What's up, everyone? Kevin Carrillo here, and welcome to another episode of the Cannabinoid Connect podcast. My guest today is Alvaro Torres, co-founder and CEO at Khiron Life Sciences Corporation. Well, we have a special guest today, Alvaro Torres, the co-founder and CEO of Khiron Life Sciences Corporation, is on with us. How are you, sir?
Very well. Thank you, Kevin, for the invitation. Looking forward.
Yes. Thank you so much for being on. I know you're a busy guy, so let's get to talking about what's going on with you. I mean, I know that obviously the world has been hit with this pandemic. It's been a bit of chaotic and crazy times. How are you and your family doing? And then secondly, how's Khiron dealing with these unsettling times?
Thank you, Kevin, for asking. Again, personally, very well. You know, it's always a tough situation, but I have a perspective that, things will be better. And not trying to get into any panic or anything like that. I don't think that's what we need anyway. So, doing very well personally. And as for Chiron, I think it's a time of reinvention. The world is not ending, it's just got suspended for a bit. And it's, I think, an opportunity to reinvent ourselves and look at, using the tools that are out there right now to build your business and make it grow. We don't gain much by just complaining about COVID. We have to actually, execute. So as Khiron, we're implementing many measures, reinventing ourselves in the way that we approach patients and consumers, which I think actually is going to make us come out of this much stronger than when we came in.
I love that mindset, man. It's like you face adversity and you just gotta address it, reflect on it and then adapt, right? Complaining and just complaining without presenting a solution is just noise, So it's amazing to hear that you have that mindset and that's what Khiron's trying to do. I know here in the U.S., some states have been slowly opening up in phases. So in South America, specifically Colombia, are you guys still on lockdown, or are you what's the situation there? Are you opening?
Well, yeah, so we have operations all across Latam. So in every country is a bit different. I think the lockdowns restrictions are starting to lift, but also we're seeing a lot more cases per day. But that's because we're increasing our testing capability. I think it's normal to say that the cases will go up if you start testing more. And if you start testing, and the way everybody's testing now is more, let's call it controlled. So if you have a case, you test people around those cases. So of course, you're going to find more. I think countries like Peru are of course, being hit hard the worst, Brazil and Mexico. I think Colombia, considering everything, is doing a good job in terms of the number of sick people and the number of deaths compared to the rest of the world. But as I said, and you said it before, I think the problem everywhere is that you have to be fearful of these things, of course, but you have to act, but you cannot be reckless. And there's a good balance that you can do. You can execute, you can go out, but just don't be reckless. And if people understand that, I see cases dropping down. We have to reopen this. That's a necessity. The economy is important.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I mean, we didn't know we didn't know what this was going to be at first, right? So everyone worldwide took the precautions and everything and took the measures that they could. And now that we're seeing with more testing that it's asymptomatic and there could be more people that have it. We just need to be cautious, but at the same time, it is important to try to get back to that level of normalcy where businesses are opening and operating again, because the next big travesty will be if the economy fails and if people are not able to put food on the table for their families and actually make a living. So with that said, I mean, let's switch gears and talk about the Latin market when it comes to medical cannabis and its industry, right? How does Colombia compare with Argentina, compare with Brazil, compare with Chile, Peru, etc.?
Well, Kevin, I started this company about 3 years ago, back in March, and back in March of 2017, only Colombia and Uruguay were actually legalized medical cannabis. It's been 3 years since then, and I can say, we are the first company to actually start sales of medical cannabis in Colombia back in the first weeks of April, one day before the lockdown and the pandemic. We actually started selling. I was lucky, I guess. Um, but, um, but my point on that is that to this date, there's probably 33 economies in Latin America. I would say that 60 or 70% of them are in advanced stages towards actually regulation after already passing legislation to approve this. This is a market of 650 million people. It's a big market. And I think now when I look at Argentina, Brazil, Peru, all these countries are already in the right path. And I think there's, well, I don't think, I'm certain there is a very good goodwill to legalize and regulate it. That makes me very positive about what's going to happen in Latin America. And of course, the rest of the world in Canada, in the United States and Europe, maybe those countries are more advanced because we have to take economy at economy. But what I see for sure is a couple of things. One, uh, every Latin American country is tired of importing opioid-based medication at astronomical prices, particularly during this pandemic where economies don't have the capacity to pay for this type of medications. Here comes cannabis, which can be locally sourced, much cheaper, with sufficient evidence that it works on conditions like chronic pain, epilepsy, and such. There's 66 million people in Latin America that can benefit from medical cannabis. And if you think about the power, the purchasing power of these 65 million people, I'll give you, let's call it $500 a year. You're talking about a $3 billion industry.
Mm-hmm.
So those numbers are not small to ignore. And so that's one trend. The other trend that's happening is that almost all across Latin America, we have great growing conditions. So there's an opportunity also to be part of the global supply chain. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not fully in the next year, but in the future. And so that's why governments are opening up. Let's cultivate, let's grow, let's do everything with quality. There's a very interesting local demand, but there's also an opportunity to be part of a global supply chain for an industry that's not going to be shut down, which I think is the number 3 point. Cannabis is here to stay in the world. Maybe some other countries are adapting slower, but nobody's going to take that back. That's not going back into the illegality. That's not going to happen. And so we are in the early stages. We are in, let's call it 1925, of cannabis. And so I think there's a big opportunity there. I think every government is looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
From my perspective, I look at that global supply chain as part of our strategy to make things more affordable. But I see a population of 65 million people that can afford that type of investment, and it's very exciting. So it takes time to convince the governments to move forward to it. But every time that, let's see, Argentina looks at what Colombia's done, and everybody start looking at what the patients in Colombia are feeling, and these conversations are moving much more rapidly than before. So I think there's a lot of expectation on this market. And in the end, everybody wants to invest in Canada and such, but there's 35 million people in Canada. There's 650 million people here. So I think it's a bigger opportunity than most people give it credit, and we'll see that. And I think investors will start to see that, this market provides a lot of opportunities.
Yeah, I want to touch on trend number 1 that you talked about, and the barrier or the challenge of the cost of importing opiates to the country, right? Outside of that challenge, are you seeing? I know here in the U.S. there's a huge opioid addiction, right? It's detrimental, and the death rate, which I don't know specifically, I don't want to say any numbers, but it's astronomical. It's been a huge problem. Are you seeing that same trend in Colombia or in neighboring countries?
Well, Kevin, I think everybody's aware. Every health authority is aware of what's happening in the U.S. because the news is so big now, and it's almost every week you hear, almost every day you hear lawsuits and deaths in the U.S. Because of the nature of the way that they lack the controls of opiates. And although these types of substances are more controlled in Latin America, nobody wants to have that situation of the States, right? Like nobody wants to go and have those type of headlines. And this is across every country that I've been to. And, I travel a lot. I used to travel a lot, but we talk to a lot of government agencies. Nobody wants that. Doctors don't want it, right? And when you talk about let's call it opioid addiction, a rate of 12 to 15% of people that can get addicted to it, that's not good health, right? And then on top of that, you have to add that it's astronomically expensive to import OxyContin or fentanyl or buprenorphine or morphine. And in the end, that I think that makes patients very, 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 like how can I say, like nervous about it. And doctors, I mean, if you think about it, you go to a doctor in Colombia or anywhere, let's call Peru, Brazil, you go to a doctor, they prescribe you, I'm going to call buprenorphine, and they give you a box of whatever, 300 milligrams. What stops a patient from not getting addicted, not calling your doctor and popping in 10 pills, right? So those type of things, I think, are on the minds of everybody, and that's one of the reasons why all these regulations are happening. On top of that, because I said again, it's very expensive to import and make. And with COVID, what you're seeing, all the money is going towards ICUs and the respiratory diseases. It's not like everybody's got the money to keep funding opioid-based medications. And I'm just talking here about pain, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of our uses, psychoactives, and anxiety and depression. I don't think we need to have all the population in Latin America drugged, So I think that I'm actually convinced that that's what's happening, and that's one of the reasons why the governments are moving forward. Nobody wants to have that.
Right, right. Well, I do want to give a shout out to Khiron. I know that recently y'all became the first company in Colombia to sell legal medicinal cannabis products with both CBD and THC concentrations. So that's a huge deal, and congratulations on that. But my follow-up question is, do the medical associations within Colombia broadly endorse cannabis as an alternative form of medicine? Like, what's their standpoint on it?
Well, I've been doing this for 3 years. For the last, I think, year and a half, our focus has been on accessing the patients. And to access the patients, you need to access the doctors. To access the doctors, you need to go to the medical associations. I think my first conversation 2.5 years ago with a medical association, I probably had the door shut on me because nobody wanted to talk about cannabis. But I think now, and you're seeing, and you can see in the news, a lot more acceptance because there's a lot more growing body of evidence, right? Like the number of papers that were 3 years ago, I think is 5 times more today. The more evidence you show, the more willing they are. So I would say yes. Today in Colombia, and I think in Latin America, there's a big acceptance for it in order to be able to talk about it.
As a follow-up to that, so like within the education, right, of these medical professionals, now that the conversation is being open in Colombia, which is good, is it actually being taught and is at the education level there when it comes to the medicinal benefits of the cannabinoids and how they relate to our endocannabinoid system?
Yeah, so when we talk about education, the first thing we have to talk about is let's break down the myths and realities of cannabis. That's a big conversation. The first one that we've been having for a year, in terms of breaking away all these issues that people talk about cannabis, and let's talk about its science. Once you go to that and you start talking about what is the endocannabinoid system, most people don't know that, even doctors. And then it's surprising for a lot to know that the human body does have an endocannabinoid system that was discovered in the 1960s by Dr. Metzulam. And you start telling that they start to see the science. And then the last step, which is what we're doing right now, is on actual practicalities, case theories, practice theories. Now, for example, we do one-on-ones, right? So we invite doctors that we're training to join our doctors in the clinics to be with a patient to prescribe cannabis. So it's a process that allows the doctor to feel not only there's evidence, but this is safe, and these are the questions I have. And once you break that last barrier, then you have doctors that are willing to prescribe. And it's not a process that you take slowly, fast. It's a slow process because there's a lot of, we are battling 100 years of myths about cannabis, right? But the evidence is there. There's more evidence being grown and being shown all the time. And that's what doctors are feeling that's going to help. And then you mentioned a point, which is we have to start training the new doctors, right? The ones that are coming on the pipeline, the ones that are getting graduated. And I tell you, in Colombia, you can see a lot of faculties in Colombia, prestigious universities, opening up and creating cannabis courses. And that's just a first step towards breaking those barriers and getting all these new doctors that are going to be trained to look at cannabis as a valid alternative. And these things are exponential. Because then you have one doctor, you have 10, you have 50, you have 100. Every doctor brings 20, 50 prescriptions a day, and that's how you build an industry. It's taken us some time to do that, but that's, I think, the proper path. And that path we can copy and paste, and I think everybody should do that across Latin America. I think Colombia, being the first one to do that, is going to provide a great blueprint for what's going to happen in the rest of the countries.
I agree with you. I mean, it sounds like y'all really have a systematic process of how you want this education process to function and work, right? It starts with the education of the doctors and adding that into the curriculum of the schools. From there, it's testing patients. And this is not, like you said, it's not going to happen overnight. I mean, cannabis and various strains affect people in different ways, just like anything with humans, right? Some people have food allergies. Some people have dietary restrictions. Some people exercise and get in shape slower or quicker than others, based off their biology or their genetics. So you're right. There is a lot of research to be done, but it's so encouraging to hear that Colombia or Latin America South America, Latin as a whole is really coming together to make that happen, and that's great.
I think the challenge now that we have, Kevin, is because, our strategy hasn't changed, but we have to change is the tactics now with COVID, right? Because now we are entering in what, we are now calling the low touch economy, right? So you have to change and adapt at the way which you train doctors. Right? The use of technology now is more important than ever in the cannabis industry, at least from my point of view, because you no longer have the ability to go and visit doctors one by one in their consultories. Right? You no longer have the ability to have 300 doctors in one conference room. Right? So if you welcome that change on digital disruption, and that I think which is what we've been focusing since March, then you're going to have a lot of more, not only more, probably slower adoption because of technology while people get onto it, but a lot more capacity to communicate to larger scales. I think that's the challenge that everybody's seeing, and that's what I was mentioning before, the opportunity that's out there to build yourself into a company that can actually focus on the service level to the doctors and the patients. So COVID also generates an opportunity. It's a challenge. The strategy doesn't change, but now you have to do all of this digitally. And that's interesting to do that. And that's going to last for the next, I think, 8 months.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what, in Colombia specifically, like how would one get a cannabis prescription?
Well, that's a very good question. And that's why I was talking about how we thought that was going to happen and how we're doing it right now. Before COVID, we have our own clinics. And I'm talking about a Khiron strategy, right? So we have our own clinics and we train doctors outside. You come to one of the clinics that we have in Bogota, even if you're a new patient or an existing patient, you come in, you have your appointment, you visit your doctor. These doctors are all trained in cannabis, but they're specialists in mental health, in chronic pain, in abnormal movements, epilepsy. And you go there and your doctor gives you your appointment, and then they figure out using scales and a methodology that we set up if you're a cannabis patient. And then you go downstairs, you pay for your medication, and you go and either you pick it up at home at the clinic, or they get delivered at home. That was before.
And that was before. So during that time, once the assessment was made and the patient knew what they were dealing with, were there certain or specific strains that were then assigned to that patient
Well, you know, in Colombia, it's mostly it's not we don't sell flour. The business here is only on oils, right? So we start categorizing into high THC, one-to-ones, high CBD, pure CBD, right? So it's a more standardized product, right? So it's our own strains on which we have the data to support that that particular high THC strain works for chronic pain. So we train the doctors on those, let's call it 4 to 5 prescriptions of cannabis oils. So we don't train them on the particular strains. We have our strains. We then we have a GMP compliant lab in which we make all our oils. Which actually, to be able to sell a product in Colombia, you have to have stability tests. You have to have a lot of permits to be able to manufacture these in quality products. So it's not. That's why we still today the only ones that can do it. It's a long process. So you train the doctors on those particularities, right? So you're not talking about White Widow or Dairy Queen or PA or FT, because in the end you're making into an oil that's standardized. And that is standardized, that's what you train the doctors and that's what they give the patients. So following up on what I was saying, that was before, no? And now we are committed to having, again, that low touch economy. So what happens today, which is very interesting, and everything we're doing in Khiron is to strengthen every part of this equation. First, I'm going to start with the doctor training. We partner with the Tech of Monterrey, let's call it, that's like the Harvard of Latin America. And we started a course two days ago with a diploma in which we are training doctors. We had 350 doctors sign up for this course. And this course is specific to Khiron and with the Tech of Monterrey, which is in Mexico. To train doctors to learn how to prescribe. And we have doctors from Colombia, Mexico, and Peru right now in the training. And then we do the same here in Colombia on webinars, and those doctors and our own doctors in the clinic, they get trained in this. Then we launched a new telehealth platform about a month and a half ago. And if you look at Serenia, which is our main clinic, with a C, Serenia, CERENIA.com.co. Then we do a lot of advertisement. We're doing a lot of push marketing for that. Patients actually call a telephone number, and they get an online medical appointment. We are launching a new telehealth platform on June 25th, which is going to be web-based, and it's going to be also on Apple Store and Google. And so patients, my whole point is we don't want patients to leave their house, particularly with COVID. You don't have to leave your house to get your medication. So you get your prescription online, that prescription gets sent to a lab. That lab then sends the medication to the patient's home by domicile. And then we partner with other pharmacies that also have that service so that we can get the product to the patient as quickly as possible. So my entire goal is now to be able to offer a full digital experience for patients and for the doctors on telehealth, on delivery, on follow-ups, which we do, right? And all the data that's going to generate is going to allow us to have better products and a better experience with the patient. And that's what I was talking to you about the COVID, what COVID does, right? So what it does for us now is that we can access a lot more patients because, now we are expanding heavily our telehealth platform. Because, if you are 65 years old and now, I don't know if this is happening in the States, but most of the countries in Colombia are placing specific restrictions to people older than 70 years old because they're an exposed population. But you know that one of the biggest populations for chronic pain is patients above 70 years old. And the conversation is, why do you want to get on a bus rapid system or a metro to go and pick a medication that we can send at home to you? And if we have all these doctors trained and we can keep your medical records safely in a system that, as I said, we're launching our second version of that in next week, then you're talking about service. And if I can deliver you at home within a day, then, that's how you start building the confidence in medical cannabis, not only on the efficacy of the product, of the program, of the product, but the service level that Khiron brings. And this digital strategy, which is, I think, is going to be our new normal, it's much easier to implement for us in every other country, right? So we offer, for example, doctors, we offer them their telehealth platform so that if you get trained on cannabis, we will give you the telehealth platform. So you can also service other patients, because in the end, no doctor today wants to spend 8 hours a day in his physical consultation office receiving 40 patients and not knowing if he or she can get infected. So these things, I think, this new normal, if we embrace that digital strategy, is going to allow us to be able to achieve more patients and make their lives easier, which is really what we've wanted from the beginning.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you've laid that out very articulately in terms of Khiron's mission, basically service what you said, 650 million people in Latin America with medicinal cannabis, and the different brands within Khiron, pharma being one, clinics, like you mentioned, being two, where there's actual doctors that are there evaluating patients and prescribing the cannabis medication. And then let's touch on the third brand. I know that y'all have a beauty brand. Is that right?
Yes. So we have a CPG division, Khiron Wellbeing. It's anchored by our first portfolio of products called Quira. It's a portfolio of products of 11 SKUs. It's a cosmeceutical product line that's mostly focused on women. It's a product line that we're selling in Colombia, that we actually selling in the States, that we're selling in the UK, and very soon in Spain. And in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be talking about ability to enter the Chilean, Uruguay, and Costa Rica markets, while we're looking at Mexico and the US. I think I call it our first child, because the first product that we came out with. And it shows a lot of what we actually are all about. We're about marketing, we're about brands, and we're about understanding consumers and patients. And now with COVID, of course, cosmetics and CPG products have taken a big hit. But I was telling you about the ability to adapt, right? And those are the challenges of COVID, but you have to adapt very quickly. I'll give you an idea. Last year, we were focused on increasing the number of retailers, right, that you wanted your product to be present. We had, I think, mostly 340, something like that, retail points all across Colombia. And that was the most exposure for any CBD product in the country. And even today, I think Quira is a clear winner in the space, not because we were the first ones, but I think our brand resonates a lot with women. We had, let's call it 90% of our sales through retail channels all the way up until February, 10% on direct sales. Today, now we are actually 35 to 40% of our sales come from digital channels. So we opened our own online platform called quiraskincare.com. That platform is now open also. It's going to be open very soon in the US and also in the UK. And because we already built a brand, we are targeting a lot into how to make sure that we can do a lot more in the digital age. And actually, that increases our gross margins, because you don't have to pay all these retailers that 40, 30% that you have to pay. You can keep some of that for yourself, or you can invest more in the marketing, which is now going to be a lot more targeted. So I think Quira shows the way that we execute, how fast we can adapt. We are moving ahead with launches of products by the end of this year on other categories, pet care and nutrition, which, I think are big categories in Latin America, particularly now with COVID. As you know, pet care and pet sales have been skyrocketing lately, not only in the US, but in Latam. And so we are very proud of what Quira has achieved, because this is the first product from Colombia with CBD to ever be sold in the States, and ever be sold in Europe. And if you look at it from a historic perspective, as I said to somebody last year, it's a moment of pride for me, because as a Colombian, we're known for selling illicit drugs to the States, right? So now to be able to say, now we're changing that dynamic, and we're actually selling a brand that's going to be well taken by a Latin American population, by other groups in the United States. I think that's very interesting. Not many people can do that. So, but we now have to embrace that digital strategy, and we are doing that almost every day.
Yeah, no, well, congratulations on the Quira brand, and especially, getting your way into the US. That's big. Digital strategy is everything. I mean, I come from a digital marketing background. I've been a social media marketing professional for almost 10 years now, and I've worked for large brands, like Dell and AT&T and others. And so I understand the value of having an online presence, especially, making it easy for your customers to find you online and purchase your products, right? Without having to call or even step inside your store, especially after this pandemic, which I think will be something that changes. People are going to be gravitating to more online sales, which they've already been in the past, but maybe more so even now. So I have a couple more questions for you. I want to talk about, so you've really touched on the opportunities on the consumable side of cannabis products, right? Here in the U.S. in 2018, the 2018 Farm Bill was passed, which basically allows for mass growth and cultivation of hemp. And the way that hemp is defined, which I'm sure, as you know, is the cannabis plant that has zero point 0.3 or less THC levels in it. And the big opportunity here is we're seeing is with the non-consumable products. Utilizing the fiber and the stalk and the herd to make hempcrete, to make houses, to make cars. So what is Khiron thinking in terms of that, or even Colombia? Has Colombia even started to think about the industrial hemp market?
Well, I tell you that, the industrial hemp market is not something that personally Khiron is looking at, just because, we are focused on medical and it's hard to do that. But as part of our sustainability program, yes, we will work with the farmers to help them and educate them so that they can get into that business. That's a commodity business, but that has a lot of potential for a lot of uses. But we probably won't do it directly. I think as far as Colombia goes, we are in a country. I don't know if you've ever been here, but we're in a country that has tremendous agricultural advantages. We have also two oceans. We have access to the Atlantic, to the Pacific. Our logistics are very impressive in the way that we can actually export, and the needs here are quite large, and we have an abundance of land. So I think the government right now has explored that opportunity mildly, but I think we belong to the Cannabis Guild. We are founders of the Cannabis Guild in Colombia, and when you start talking about how do you substitute illegal crops, what can you substitute it with? You talk about, well, if you're talking about industrial hemp, that's a big opportunity because the opportunities for industrial hemp are many. And, Colombia, let's call it by itself, is 50 million people. It's got even in this pandemic, it's one of the countries that's going to outperform most of the rest. We have a big domestic market for this type of things, for construction and such. So what it takes now is to be able to educate the farmers on these type of strains and start growing it, and then going to the demand side and start looking at these opportunities. But I think the government is going to be very, very open to that because, we can solve two problems. We can solve a problem of illicit cultivation, and we can solve a problem of building our own industry on the industrial side. So, I don't think we will be part of that because it's a very different business, other than making us part of our sustainability efforts with farmers. And that's always a good investment to make because, goodwill goes a long way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an amazing plant. They call the buffalo of plants because there's no waste to the plant at all, right? Which is pretty incredible. Well, Alvaro Torres, CEO, co-founder of Khiron Life Sciences Corporation. You guys have core operations in Colombia. You're fully licensed in the country for cultivation, production, domestic distribution, and international export of both THC and CBD medicinal cannabis. Sir, I appreciate you being on. Is there anything that you want to leave the audience with or plug at this point?
Well, Khiron, I think I've plugged enough, but I would just only say that, the strategy that we follow is about long-term value, right? We believe that the closer we are to the consumer with brands and medical education And that the more value we can add to that consumer, the more value we will add to shareholders. So, for us, it's a commitment of being able to say, I'm not in the business of growing 80 cents a pound coffee. I'm in the business of selling $4 lattes. And so that's every effort that we do is to be able to get to that. Because, we believe that's really what the value is going to be for everybody.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thank you so much, sir. I appreciate your time, and keep up the great work in Colombia. And hopefully, y'all become the template when it comes to education on the medicinal side of cannabis, specifically THC and CBD.
Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate it. Have a good day. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your audience.
Yes. Thank you all for listening. We'll talk to you next time. Bye.
Bye-bye.